Okay, hello.
Okay.
So, do you want to introduce yourself first, Annika?
Okay. Hello. I usually welcome my audience, so I'll do that, and your audience in this case as well. So hello and welcome, everybody. um, so I'm Annika, Annika Vliegen. I have written a book about my memoir about medical gaslighting. I'm a patient of a more than one rare disease, but the particular one that I tend to focus on most is the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Whereas patients, we say it's rarely diagnosed rather than it's a rare disease. Our sense is that there's a lot more of us around than are being identified. But as I said, there's other rare diseases in our family unit. And my focus is tends to be on medical gaslighting. And to my mind, there's a close connection between the two. Both of them go a lot broader but they connect. And I think people like Bryony, and you'll introduce yourself in a second, can actually be of an enormous help to patients who've been through similar as I have.
Brilliant. And I'd also like to pick up the one thing I've learned about you is that your background in looking at quality of life before a certain point in your experience, I guess, with your health. Yeah, which is wonderful.
And continuing after that point as well. It just remains for me a real focus. I think too often the focus is on quantity of life and what's use if it's no quality.
Yeah. Yeah, well, on that note, I suppose introducing myself, when I was a teenager, I was working in a shop with clothes, quite happy, but didn't feel like I wanted to offer something, and I ended up in care work. And my first shift as a 19-year-old was on a ward, a geriatric ward. And I came away, my mum picked me up, and I was like, they're keeping people alive who've got no quality of life. And it was, heartbreaking. So I've gone through various sort of supportive caring roles, healthcare, education. Right now, I'm a coach. I work with people to open up awareness in life so that space is created for wider choice. And then from that place, we can find more empowerment and flow and better relationships, beginning with ourselves. I also deliver mental health first aid training because I want to keep a safe space in coaching, and that's why I did that training and then thought, oh, I like this course. And I love working with groups as well as one-to-one. But a lot of the coaching I do is supporting other people who are finding their way with something, who are supporting other people, and some return to work coaching with women coming back after coming into parenthood, however they've come into parenthood, and coming back after long-term sick as well. So yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning, because you're referring to it, but I haven't mentioned it as such, that although I have the experience as a patient, my academic background is first in occupational therapy and then also in health research, did a postgrad in health research. And it kind of, I think that gives me another perspective on the whole issue of medical gaslighting, and especially within rare diseases, because that's where the health research really could play a wonderful role.
Yes, and really shift things. I think the other thing to introduce is actually we met through Quaker meeting.
I was thinking, where shall we get that in as well? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've sat in
actually,
silence remotely on different pieces of land together before we came into conversation around this, which I love.
Yeah, that's how it happens with Quakers, isn't it? Often.
Yes.
Meet in silence.
Yeah, very much so.
Actually, a big piece of my book is not so much going on about what Quakers are and how and who and but how it's lived, because I've actually had enormous support from friends with a capital F. Quakers refer to each other as friends with a capital F.
Yeah. So in terms of that support, if you're going to start from the place of support, what is the support that's made the difference there?
I've had support in very many different ways and in different layers. I find it very difficult to just pick one and say that is what really made the difference. But I think what I keep coming back to is that the most important thing that you can do for somebody in our position, I speak I speak for myself, and I'm kind of dragging other people along, whether they want to or not,
Go on.
generalizing when maybe I shouldn't. But I've had enough contact with other people who write to me and say, or I read in patient groups and things like that. So, there is a bit of backup to what I'm saying. And the very most important piece of support that you can give somebody who has been or is being medically gaslit is 2 sentences, and they don't have to be spoken. It's a message that you put across, and it's, I believe you, and I believe in you.
Yes.
And I think that's where people like coaches and therapists and play an absolutely crucial role, because it's often you're in a very powerful role when you're guiding people in how they think and how they feel. And they put that trust in you, and it's specifically that trust that has been so badly damaged.
Yes, this is what I'm thinking back to what you said before we started recording
Yeah.
about the people who are there to go to and help you are part of the profession that has hurt and caused the harm. And yeah, coaching and therapy can be incredible spaces for being seen and heard, which can be a great stepping stone to well, what's the words? Finding the, perhaps you can fill these in if I sort of offer my best language for it, but for people who find themselves in a place where they have lost trust, where they've been gaslit, where they've not been believed or seen, or things haven't been picked up when they've been shouting for it to be picked up, and then needing to sort of rebuild a strength or re-find voice to be able to go back again to speak to someone.
It's really, really difficult. That's one of the things that I found, because by starting to write, I made connections with more patients who've been through this. And time again, it's, how do I go to a new doctor? How do I find somebody I'm going to trust? And we were this morning, I did the recording in the Dutch video that's going to be played, which is, and I didn't find somebody in one of the caring professions roles so quickly, because I only started looking for somebody on Sunday, always thorough. But I did find a patient willing to open up. It was very, very emotional. It was a really good, she was so open, so vulnerable. And what she brought to the table, and is very important, is that we go in with lack of trust, but also knowing that they have our file, and in our file we are already described as a difficult patient who comes up with symptoms that either don't exist or exaggerate them, who don't do what they're being told to do, because we do what we're being told to do, but we go back and it hasn't worked. Well, it's got to be our fault. It's not going to be the doctor's fault. Those kind of things. And they have that on paper. So neither of you go into that what should be a new and fresh therapeutic relationship. You actually both enter into it with a kind of caution, to say the least. And so that's quite a light word for it, I would say. But it also leads to patients taking risks, because what we've learned is that the people who are there paid to help us actually can cause a lot of harm, and have already done so to us. And the gaslighting has spoon-fed us into believing that we shouldn't really believe what our body is telling us.
Yeah, which is, for me, I do a lot of embodiment stuff, and I train in this, not just for the work that I do with other people, but for me to relearn how to listen to my body.
And so often here in our family, what happens is that I will feel worse, look worse, behave differently. I'll be saying that I feel weak, or there's pain, or there's something I don't recognize. Actually, I have a big repertoire of things I already recognize now. So it's like, it really hurts, but it doesn't matter, There's completely different conversations than you would find elsewhere.
The things you never thought you'd say.
Yeah. But equally, there's something going on there, and it doesn't actually feel that bad, but it does feel very, very worrying.
Yeah.
And that's when the alarm bells are going. And then I was like, well, let's call the doctor. Well, let's not. Let's just not, because Maybe it isn't there. That's one of the possibilities. That's what I've learned. Maybe it isn't anything bad at all, but worse, it probably is something bad, but they won't find it and they will point the finger at me.
Yeah.
And that's what's in every single trip to the hospital. And I can tell you there have been many, and mostly the unexpected ones, but even a lot of the expected ones, every trip that involves some kind of investigation or some kind of putting forward a new picture of something that's happened with my body involves humongous amount of fear. It's petrifying.
Yeah.
It's what if they don't find anything? What will they say now? Will they be willing? Will they know anything about the conditions that have now been identified? Because the thing with rare diseases as well is that you go to emergency rooms and often there's not a lot of real knowledge about it. Really, it is true that the patient is a specialist. The doctor provides the breadth of information.
Yes.
And you need to be able to rely on that. And you need to know and respect that as a patient too. If you go in there, I know everything there is to know about my body.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah. Not
It really needs to be a tandem. When it works extremely well when it is a tandem. That's what I was saying about it's the people who are in the professions that actually cause the harm to me in terms of medical gaslighting.
Yeah.
It's also people in those professions that actually kind of rescued me is maybe a bit too dramatic, but it does feel like that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the difference? Because I know you talked to me before about learning to explain yourself and not justify. But what have you learned about that language and how to have those conversations? So you say you're doing in tandem with someone.
Yeah, it's really important, and it's something that my book's a memoir, so it's not this is how you ought to do it kind of book,
Yeah.
and I don't think I can do that anyway. That's the thing again about rare diseases. What works for me probably not going to work for you because we're all so very different, and we're all by the very fact that it's rare, we're on the outside of the bell curves of any study.
Mm.
You know? So I have a lot of respect for this is what worked for me, but what does keep coming back as a theme explicitly and also between the lines is developing a vocabulary to explain what's happening, because again, because of the fact that it is rare, the language doesn't often the language doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I have a particular kind of pain, but I can't describe it to you because I've never heard anybody describe anything that actually fits what I'm feeling today. You know, that issue is a big one. And so I can give some examples. The zebra is one of those.
Go
I
on,
don't
explain the
know
zebra.
if I need to go on about the zebra again because I'm assuming a lot of people, but I do find I make the assumption that, well, everybody now knows about the zebra, but actually, no, it's the people to who it has applied for a while who know. It's just that's my tribe. You know, they know. But the zebra is there. You'll find it if you do visit my Facebook page, my website, and even the cover of my book. They all have zebras on. And if you look up anything at all about EDS, it will be the first thing in your face will be some kind of zebra reference. And the reason is that I don't know if this is how doctors are taught, but we are told that doctors are taught if you hear hooves, think horses. Seems most logical. Chances are highest you're going to get a horse. So you go to the doctor and you say, oh, I'm constantly tired. I can't express how tired I am because again, the language is lacking and so forth. And it doesn't matter whether I've rested all day. It doesn't matter whether I've slept through the night. I'm always tired. And it does, yeah, I can do a bit of exercise and yes, I'll have a different quality of sleep and I'll still be very exhausted and sometimes even worse the day after, But you're already a drama queen. You can see them thinking it, drama queen. So you get the standard advice that works for horses: rest, exercise, healthy eating, do a bit of yoga, whatever, and it doesn't work. And you go back and they say, I got into a pattern of, well, come back in 2 weeks' time, come back in 3 weeks' time. We'll see if it's any better. We'll try you on a few. We had painkillers. I got antidepressants was an option, which I did take eventually, and for a very, very long time. I'm talking decades, just to place that what very, very long time means in this context. and food supplements, and just tried the things that came to mind for a horse.
Yeah.
And then, because that still wasn't working, it had to be down to me, because I could say that I was doing what they were telling me, but the results weren't there to support that.
Mm.
And neither were the results in terms of blood tests and stuff, because Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is a problem with the collagen.
So it doesn't show up on your
And
blood test.
it doesn't show up on x-rays unless you've really damaged yourself, which happens a lot in EDS. If then you go in with a lot of injuries, which are very, very normal in EDS, and with a lot of bruises, which are very, very normal in EDS, you again risk being put into a whole different category, of either being abused or self-abuse, to be able to get the attention of the doctors or your family or your friends. I was put on a heart rate monitor at one stage by my specialist in Belgium, and I was living in England, but I was using the best of both systems, really. And I was told I wore it as a symbol to my friends so that I could convince them that things were bad for me. I've completely forgotten where I started out. Language, yes. So if then you say, well, actually, maybe I'm a zebra, maybe I'm not a horse.
Yeah. And I think, whatever, if doctors are taught that, I think our brains still work like that, don't they?
Yeah.
And I, as a coach, so much of my training was around, before you've asked the question, when you ask the question, be prepared, stay curious. Don't sit there thinking you know what they're going to answer, because our brain makes it up. But I know that when I coach, my brain's constantly making stuff up. And I have to keep knocking that to the side and knocking that to the side, keep asking questions, because I'm holding space where, like you said, it's the doctors you're working with, where your body, you're the expert of your body. They know stuff you don't know about it. And they have access to resources and research and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm coaching someone, they are the expert. They know. And it's the amount of times I smile to myself, I've completely assumed someone's going to answer a particular way, and something completely different comes up, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You learn. You
Yeah.
learn, don't you?
Yeah, and it is that thing. And when I trained with antenatal education and went through birth myself, around the same time, there's a similar thing, that we have pathologized birth in a way that other people, and particularly, are the experts of the birth process.
Yes.
And women, they're so important, and such completely different experience when women go into the process thinking, I'm the expert, and I'm in a position where if something feels wrong, which is harder to decipher because it's a really weird process to go through. It doesn't feel normal in the slightest, but to be able to say someone needs to check me out, and again, that sort of tandem thing.
And I think in my case, certainly the opposite turned out true as well, but it turned out true because of what I had been through. Because when at first it was put to me that it was probably my mind that was playing tricks on me, I was happy to buy into that, because if I could gain control over that, I'd be healthy and I would have done anything. I mean, I've often said it, as the years continued, if somebody would have said to me, just wipe cow dung on your face 3 times a day and you'll be better, I'd have tried it, like, I really don't get. So yeah, I was happy to face myself and everything in it. But it's only, I think it's 3 years ago now. It was mid-COVID anyway, so that gives it an idea. And I was finally in rehabilitation hospital. I was there thanks to COVID, because there was beds available, because operations were being cancelled. And I happened in that moment to find that hospital and to find the courage to actually say, you might be able to help me, what do you think? And they were. But one of the things that they kept saying to me was, listen to your body. Very good message. And it's very in to say that to people. And I consistently answered, I'm more than willing to do that. But anybody in a healthy body feeling like me would stay in bed every day, all day. And that cannot be the idea of being here in rehabilitation. So, no, it isn't. But that's where the conversation ended, until I was with the psychologist that was there, who I saw once a week, and I'd built a good relationship very, very quickly with her. She was very smart in that sense, actually. to do that in such a short time with somebody who was so suspicious of people in roles.
Make me
Um,
trust you.
and so she said, well, you need to listen to your body, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, okay, well, then I'll just stay in bed. I said, the physios have said it, the OTs have said it, and I always give the same answer. I have learned not to trust my body. I've had to learn not to trust. She said, well, then you shouldn't listen to your body, should you? No, you should use your intelligence. Oh, grief. Can't do that. But she saw that I was flustered by that
Yeah.
idea. And she'd said it very instinctively because it was right as well. She was very instinctively right with a lot of things for me. But we were both kind of out of our depths with that idea. Like, yeah, it's a great idea, but how do we implement it? And we worked out a schedule. And what we learned, or what I learned, and she heard and supported, was, and again, it helped me explain to other people, because in my condition, it's often invisible. Like, I could be reasonably okay. Somebody could say she looks a bit fluish or whatever, but you wouldn't expect when you see me like this how bad things get here on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is I'd already learned about functional hours in most of my adult life, in all of my adult life, really. When you work out an average of a big chunk of time, it always works out at about 4 to 5 functional hours a day. Now, what I mean by functional hours, that's an important one that I've also learned. You can say that and people go, oh, yeah. Oh, it's not very much, is it? But they don't really grasp what it means.
Yeah.
Functional hours are those hours in which I can do something that requires any skill at all. So that is getting up, going to the loo, putting my clothes on, washing myself, eating, preparing food, shopping, looking after my child, having a decent relationship with my husband, working if I could, anything at all. But it also includes the very crucial relaxation, leisure. Because lying out in the hammock reading a book, that is not something I can do outside of my functional hours.
Right.
That is not good enough support for me, and it requires skill to read a book.
Yes.
Or I would have to take something really inane that's not going to do it for me anyway. So, and that's not going to be relaxation. So if you realize that and you translate that to 4 or 5 hours out of your day, and I sleep nowadays, there has been periods of my life where I slept 15 hours a day. So then add those 4 and you're there, and just about doesn't really matter that much. But now I have 8 hours or less of actual sleep. So I have a lot of hours awake that are totally useless in a way. That what can I do? Having this conversation would be too much. I mean, like I said at the beginning, it's an average. So I can today, do a conversation this morning that was recorded, have one with you now, and I'm still going to go, hopefully, if I'm well enough, to the back clinic this afternoon, do my exercises there. But I will need to schedule around that. I have been scheduling around that days before and days after. So it takes a lot of cognitive application, really, to make sure that the average is okay. But the closer I stick to the 4 or 5 hours neatly in a package of a day, the better I function. And even more, what the schedule with the psychologist actually brought about was, if I do a half hour of whatever activity, maybe, and a half hour of rest, of useless time, let's call it that, and repeat that, then I function at my best. Then the quality of those 4 or 5 hours goes up.
So it's like an ebb and flow, like breathing.
Yes, like breathing.
Yeah.
See, that's why you are a coach, isn't it?
I've learned all this wonderful stuff about the hormones we release on breathing in and breathing out, and just how important it is to have that balance, and focus on it. So I mean, I'd like to hear from you what you've learned in terms of what you're sharing with the community of other people who have rarely diagnosed diseases. But yeah, people like myself, coaches, therapists, professionals in healthcare, friends. Like what helps in terms of what people can do to support you? You've said about being believed, being
Yeah.
heard. Yeah.
And I'm actually immediately thinking of a friend with capital F of ours, who I'm
Yeah.
sure you know as well, who sadly died at the end of last year, Phil, who actually is an exception to that, because to her, how I experienced it was it really didn't matter whether she believed me or not. That was by the by, whether I was believable, genuine, whatever. If I said I had a need, she saw that need and she saw that she could meet it. She was there meeting it. I can see that coming in. You recognize it?
Yeah. And I didn't know. I've not spoken. Yeah, I've not seen her for a while.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I'm hearing it with love, and just can absolutely see her being like that. Yeah. What do you need? So pragmatic and loving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, it's not my judgment to make.
Yeah.
I'm being called to help you. I'll help you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was very upset for a good few days. We were very close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that and actually thinking of that wonderful human, not being fearful of the not knowing and not being fearful of asking questions and say, well, what do you need me from me?
Yeah, she was very straight about
Yeah.
that, wasn't she? And if she couldn't do it, she couldn't do it. And then she got frustrated that nobody else would as well. So she's
Oh
thinking,
yeah,
if I'm
she's a
called,
fear.
somebody else has got to be called as well.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Can I support you through the emotion in some way?
I'm going to take some time after. Yeah. And I feel like, yeah, just bringing her into the conversation is loving
Oh,
it.
sorry.
I mean, yeah. Being out of a community for a while, and I take responsibility for not having kept in touch with community, and life and death happens.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
happens, and I think
And
my experience of support and needing support through times when we don't know how to find our way through the web of support, taking responsibility for reaching out to people, which I can't imagine how hard it is with your experience yourself and people you're connected with who have had. But and the different kinds of support, so we know what kind of nourishment different people give us.
And that's what I meant about it being layered and very different. One of the things I was lucky, lucky in many ways. Let me add that. That's one of the things I knew, but I discovered all the more by writing the book and making the contacts at the same time. And now I've called up so many of the different lucks that I forgot which one I was going to refer to. Where did I start? Do you know? We were talking about the layers of help. Yeah, in my training as an occupational therapist, we actually learned a theory and a theoretical process to follow when asking for help. Are you familiar with it? I don't know
No.
if you are. I found it so useful for me, let alone for my patients. I was only functional as an occupational therapist for 5 years, but I've been a patient for a heck of a lot longer, and I found that so useful. So the first thing you do when you go and ask for help, instead of going, say I call you and I say, Bryony, could you help me? Because I really need you to do A, B, or C for me. I'll have a very different result if I call you and I say, we could do it. We could just pretend, hi, Bryony, it's Hanneke. I've got a problem,
Oh, tell me.
Yeah. So then I describe the problem, whatever it is, and I still haven't asked you for help. I'm just explaining the problem so that you know and you're on board. And then I say, you might be able to play a role in that. I might have said that at the start as well. You might be able to play a role in it. That shows also, for one, you're on board with what the problem is, but also I'm being quite open that you might be able to play a role, but you have the right to say no. I'm not putting any pressure on that. It won't affect our relationship. It's just that's what I'm facing and I trust you. And the likelihood is that if you do have to say no, that you'll be on board with problem solving by now. You'll be going, oh, I can't, but hang on, I think I know someone. They don't know you yet and you don't know them, but I trust them with this.
Yeah, because to me, you're useful.
Yeah.
To me, like you've got resources and need a brain share on this.
Yeah. And I thought you might be able to do this, but if you can't, maybe you can help me think through. And it works in many ways, because it often does mean you get the help that you actually called to ask. If it doesn't, it does get somebody on board to help problem solve it, but it also strengthens the relationship.
Yeah.
Because both are valued in whatever their state is. Both are listening. And what I learned for myself very much was, listen to your friends. Don't expect them to listen to you, and listening when you're extremely exhausted is not the easiest thing to do. I think healthy people know that just as well as anybody that's ill. But it is important. And sometimes people say to me, I really shouldn't complain to you, which for one is condescending to say anyway. But for another, my answer often is, well, if people stop telling me about their woes, then my level of isolation really shoots through the roof instantly.
And you become less useful to, or apparently less useful, perceived to be less useful to the people.
Yeah.
And I think that the strategy just shared, for me, that says you're in charge and in the lead of this issue you need support with.
And managing it.
And you're the one reaching, sort of the project manager, I suppose, of it.
But the other bit is, by then listening back, in that situation, but also in the friendship in general, get to know your people and know who to ask what. There's a good few people that I know I don't need to ask practical support to, because they're not in a position to give it for whatever reason. But who I can call and say, I'm really panicking, can you just give me a quarter of an hour to vent? And they'll be there. And equally the other way around, there are those people who are just not the people to share all your emotional baggage with. But if you say to them, look, I'm just calling you because I've driven away from home and I've left the soup out in the kitchen and I'm staying at my parents for 2 nights and it'll be gone off and it'll stink in my house when I get back. Would you please go and put it in the fridge? And that quarter of an hour later, your soup will be safely in your fridge. And don't mix them up. Don't expect what is not within what people have ready to offer.
I advocate in mental health first aid courses, practical things that organisations can do is have your emergency contact for physical first aid reasons.
Yes.
Most people want a different person if it's a mental health crisis or a situation, not necessarily even a crisis, but a situation, because we'd go to different people for different things.
And also some people are really, really good at what's apparently superficial things, like, I'll drive you around or whatever. And others are just brilliant to call in an emergency situation. And again, don't mix them up. Just make a heck of a mess. See, I have experience in each of these.
Get it wrong a few times. No, okay. So in terms, before we wrap it up, your book, the cover's been revealed today. Anything you want to say about your book before we close?
Anything I want to say about it? There's a lot to say about it, obviously. I'm kind of, if I start, maybe I shouldn't. As I said, it's a memoir. Starts from birth, really, almost. And I'm 52 now, and I stopped the narrative at the point where I started writing. So more than a year has passed since, so I've already got new material that could be added to that. But it focuses around the medical gaslighting, and the reason that I got to the point where, yes, people had said so many times through my life, you could really write a book about this, not just about me, but about other things within our family unit that were happening as well, which are referred to in the book. And somehow it wasn't, it wasn't right, and then I got to the point where so many people kept saying, you write well, we really enjoy your pieces I wrote on blogs, or if I've written a letter of complaint to a company or something like that, apparently I'm genius at those. People really enjoy reading them. Maybe it's the Quaker in me, because I kind of try and
plain speaking,
truth, but still try and put it in a way that, for one, they'll be willing and able to hear. I think that's an important one. But also that holds people in that, I've made mistakes. This is a mistake you made. Just own it, please. Kind of message. So anyway, I was being told that people enjoyed my pieces of writing, and that helped my confidence. But what really changed was that I found that I was communicating differently with my support net, my professional support network. That I was using things like functional hours, zebras, there's many others. And that the effect of that was extremely positive. That I was actually an equal partner in my health and social care all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And it happened without, I'd done a lot of work with nobody that called themselves a coach, but with therapists and counselors and, people with similar terms, similar jobs. I had faced a lot of things. I had tried to push myself past it, but this happened. It seemed like a natural process. It was probably a natural process because of the insights that I had gained and because of all the experience of the 30 years before. Because it was 20 years before I had one of the right diagnoses, which wasn't EDS yet. That came a few years later. But when they found that I was at death's door because I didn't produce enough cortisol, and again, everything in my body said I was dying. Even my little toddler, he was 3 years old, said, "Mummy, you're dying, aren't you?" And I was. And it was turned. But there was 20 years of going to the doctors and having the wrong diagnosis, which kind of bought me a ticket to condescendence, neglect.
Yeah.
There's a whole list of terms. And so it documents all that. Like, how do you, for one, build a happy life whilst it's going on?
Yeah.
So I often hear, "Oh, you're so strong. How do you do it?" And it's like, well, tell me the alternative.
Yeah.
I'll hear if it's any good for me, because I very much doubt it.
Yeah.
And to some people it is. To some people it is genuinely better to just cave in and let go.
But it's being in choice, isn't it?
Yes, and having it respected.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Annika, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being so willing to hear as well.
Yeah.
When we first connected over this, we were both like, okay, there is something we could do together, but what and how and what's it, we're kind of, the calling's there, but what do we do with it? Kind of thing.
And sometimes it's a bit, there's mist in the way, but we'll start talking and connect. And I guess that's the whole part of this process you've been talking about, and people's experiences, start connecting and start having conversations.
Yeah. And it works the other way as well, in terms of when you were asking, what can I offer people to help? Asking the questions, saying the words, make the assumptions, but make the mistakes, own them.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have assumed that. I'm sorry.
And this was one of the scariest things getting into coaching, and especially people I trained with who were consultants, so they had been paid for years to tell people what to do. You start coaching by asking questions, you've got no idea what's going to happen. So yeah, keep on. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
And thank the people who were listening and following us.
Yes, thank you for joining us.